Hi, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of the PETHS Alumni Network podcast. I'm your host, Nathan, and today we are joined by two 2016 grads. We have Priya Allen and Emily Yao. How are you both doing today?
Good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much. Thank you again on a Good Friday. We spoke about it. Emily, unfortunately, you don't have Good Friday in the US. You're working in New York currently at DoorDash as a strategy and operations associate. Whereas Priya, you've taken the HR route. You're working at Securian Canada, which is a life insurance company. So two very different clientele, I'm sure, two different thought processes when making decisions. You're working in their HR division. So I kind of wanted to contrast, the different areas you can explore in business, right? Because I think to an outsider, business is people assume it's very homogenous, right? You're crunching numbers, that kind of thing. But I kind of want to highlight the differences between the two. And as well, Emily, you went to Ivy, and Priya, you went to Telfer at Ottawa. So I kind of want to contrast those two things as well. But offline, we talked a little bit. I think you mentioned your friendship is going on like 22 years, is it? So you both met at Franklin. So it's been a long time coming, right? So it's a little bit different because a lot of times on the podcast, we have people who don't necessarily know their friend group going in, but was it more comfortable going in to PET with like close friends? Whereas like you didn't have to really like guess how was that experience transitioning for you?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think having like a group of friends go with us was very helpful because we went to Franklin, we were in French immersion. So pretty much everyone in French immersion ended up going to PET. And there was even some people who were at Franklin for a few years in French immersion, then they went to a different elementary school, but then we all came back together at PET again. So we knew like a lot of the people from the French immersion group before going into high school, which was honestly really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also think like when you find really good friendships, like you want to keep them. So like we were able to maintain our friendships throughout university too, despite not going to the same schools. And like we definitely didn't talk every day because like we had our own lives going on. But I think that was pretty instrumental, like keeping the good ones when you find them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like you touched on, you pour into the relationships that really matter to you, and you have different schedules in high school and university, but finding that core group of friends that can really help you. So I'll start with like Priya first. What are some key experiences for you? Did you have any like goals going into high school, and if so, like what were they?
Goals, definitely step one, survive.
Mm-hmm.
um, that was honestly the biggest thing, was just kind of to get through it. I think everyone kind of says that high school is a difficult time in life. It's, not ideal, but yeah, just kind of get through it. It gets better afterwards. But the key things that really kind of helped me through high school was band. I was in the band. I played the clarinet. Haven't touched it since, but it was really fun. It kind of like was a separate community outside of classes and stuff, and so it was like just a group of people where you kind of got to know each other over the 4 years, and you spent a lot of time together because it wasn't just like music class. We also had like band practice as well in the mornings and in the evenings, so it ended up being like just a bigger group of people that you really could talk to and get to know and stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Emily, how about you?
I think being on student council was really instrumental for me in high school. I think in like elementary school and grade 9, like I was very quiet. Priya can attest to this. I had never really I was very shy, quiet, that type of person. But I think being on a SAC helped me kind of break out of that shell a little bit. And it also helped me recognize like you don't need to be the loudest person in the room to make change. And I think that was actually really helpful for me in instilling more confidence when I was in high school and like going into university, just being a bit more sure of myself and the things I was doing. And I think that can be extrapolate to like any club really. Like I think joining any type of curricular can give you that. It doesn't have to be SAC, it doesn't have to be band, but I think having a group of people that are going through the same experience as you outside of class is pretty nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you
So I
did
think
blossom quite a bit in high school. You start like the difference between grade 9 to grade 12 was pretty crazy.
Yeah, it was
Mhm.
super
Yeah.
quiet.
I think you both touched on the idea of finding your group of people, right? Whether it's music or student council, you spend so much time with them and you're working towards a common goal. So you really get to know other people, but also you get to know yourself, right? And I think that's a piece of advice that I hear on this podcast all the time is to join clubs, find your group of people, and it'll really help you, right? And neither of you really mentioned the idea of business so far, right? And both of you ended up going into business. Was it did you two like arrive at it together, or like what were the two deciding factors for each of you going into business?
Yeah, so I'll start. So for me, I had no idea what I wanted to do. Honestly, at one point I was thinking I was going to go into science. At another point I was like, I'm going to be a teacher. Like, I had no clue. And so like this belief that you have to know what you want to do in high school is just ridiculous and not true. Even when I was going into university, I still didn't know. I just was like, okay, well, like I like organizing and stuff and whatever. I was like, I'll go into like general management. And so I decided to go to Ottawa because I stayed in French. And I went into just like a general management degree, but then while in university realized that there wasn't really anything I could do with that, and so I switched to HR at that point. So no, I had no idea in high school. You could have asked me and I would have been like, no clue, I'm just gonna wing it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think you touched on it. Like, how are we supposed to know when we're like 16, right? So yeah, that's kind of the idea of why I started this page, but I'd love to hear your thoughts too, Emily.
Yeah, I had no idea. It was definitely
Yeah.
positive elimination. I like took grade 11 physics and I was like, hell no, I'm not doing that ever again. So I
Mhm.
didn't take any of the science courses after that. I like vetoed out science. And then yeah, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and business like pretty generic, so that's kind of why I went through it. I also like candidly wanted to make money, so I was like didn't want to go. I wanted to go into a field where I knew there was like lucrative career options, so that's why I went into business.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think both of you kind of iterated that point. Like, you don't really have to know, but I feel like at Pet, it's so like there's so much pressure to know, right? I think a lot of people, like, we all know someone who knew what they wanted to do since grade 9, but like I think for all three of us, we didn't really know. And luckily, we've all found our path, right?
I also
So
want to say like there's so many people I know now, even at our age, like we're 26 now, and like I know so many people that are pivoting their careers now. So whatever you do in school, and like it's never it's unlikely that you'll stay in that exact field that you choose and like the program you choose.
Yeah, even like the undergrad you get is probably like for a lot of people, it doesn't end up being what you go into like your full-time career. Like it doesn't have to be that you start school when you're 18 and then that's what you're doing for the rest of your life either. You can definitely pivot afterwards while you're in school, like whatever. But business is a really good like program that I think relates to pretty much every field. So if you really don't know and you just do a business degree, it will like you'll either it'll help you find what you want to do, or once you find what you want to do, it will have some kind of impact, like positive impact to help you with whatever field you end up in.
I think it's a good key, right? It opens a ton of doors in your future. It leaves a lot of doors open, and it gives you a very well-rounded kind of education, right? It gives you technical skills, soft skills, which we'll touch on a little bit later. I know, Priya, you have a lot of advice about giving feedback, which is something I want to talk about, right? Because as much as we hate to receive feedback, I think everyone needs to receive it in order to grow, right? It's how we grow, right? But fast forward to the end of high school, and the big decision that every high school student kind of feels pressure to make is where are you going after Pet, right? So Priya, you went to Ottawa, and Emily, you went to Ivy at Western. So we'll start with Priya. How did you end up at Ottawa? I know you mentioned the French immersion program, but were there any other factors that played into it?
Yeah, for sure. So I actually took a year off between high school and university because when everyone was applying to uni, I had no clue what I wanted to do still. So I was like, I'll take a year off, get like a retail job, make some money to help pay for university and go from there. So it wasn't until like afterwards, so like the next year, that I figured out what I wanted to do. But yeah, honestly, I chose Ottawa. The biggest reason was French, but also their co-op program is really good as well. Especially like being in Ottawa, all of like the government facilities want co-op students, and so they go to either Ottawa or Carleton, but actually I feel like most go to Ottawa over Carleton. So it was just like pretty much if you're in co-op, you're almost guaranteed to get a job. So those are the two main reasons that I picked Ottawa. Even though it's kind of far away, I was like, whatever, it's fine, I'll survive.
Hmm. Awesome. How about you, Emily?
I was indexing to be further away, so I liked that Western was like 3 hours away. I could have my own university experience living away from home. So I liked that part of it. And then in terms of school, I don't really know. I think I definitely wanted to be at a business school at there's so many credible like business programs across Ontario. So like I don't think that Ivy in itself was like at the top of my list for any reason over any other business school. I did go visit the campuses before I chose. I liked the Western campus. I thought it was really beautiful, really nice. and I think that at the end of the day, like it was just it made sense for me. Like just from visiting the campus, I could imagine myself being there. I had a few friends that were going. The business program stood out to me as well. So yeah, I would say that was like kind of more of like a gut feeling versus anything else. Um, and then, oh, one more piece I would add is for at Western, I did like that the business program was only third and fourth year. Yes, it's a risk, but it made it a lot more interesting because people would have different backgrounds in their first and second year. And so, like, if you made it there, then you are coming in with a bunch of fresh perspectives. And I liked that piece too.
Were you in BMOS your first 2 years?
As a BMOS, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Most kids end up just taking BMOS, right? And
Yeah.
it's transferable for the most part. But yeah, you get kids who are in music, geography. Had some interesting conversation with them. But I think both of you mentioned that there's really a lot of good schools. We're lucky to have a lot of good business schools in Ontario. We don't necessarily have to go too far to get a good education, and every school kind of has its own benefits. And it sounds like both of you calculated it very well. Which is something I kind of want to portray through this page, is that you need to do your own research so that you make the most informed decision that's best for you, right? So yeah, with Priya, you mentioned you started going into HR, that kind of direction, right? And I would kind of ask, like you deal with humans, right? Human resources is HR. Are you naturally good with people, or do you have to kind of pick that up as you go?
When you asked that, I saw Emily laugh a little bit
Yeah.
because I know I'm not naturally good at it. Yeah, no, so it definitely, like, I used to be also like kind of shy, not really good at talking to people. I just kind of like learned it over time. It's just kind of something you get into. But I just want to also say that like HR is much more broad than a lot of people realize. When you say HR, everyone thinks it's like, oh, employee relations, like you hire, fire, and like deal with employee issues, and while that is part of HR, it's thankfully not the part that I'm in. There's a lot of different parts of it, and so I'm actually in more so like learning and development type of stuff. And with that, I mean, I still do have to deal with people, but it's not kind of in the same way that you're dealing with like that difficult situation. I mean, being in HR in general, you have to deal with that, but it's just kind of something you learn over time with experience. Having a good manager helps a lot to kind of coach you through the difficult situations, but it's just kind of like learning on the job type stuff. Honestly, I don't even think university really prepared me for it. It's just work prepares you for it.
Yeah, so I'll dive a little bit deeper before we pivot over to Emily's endeavors into strategy and operations, which is a flip side of business. But I saw you were at the CRA, right, which is a public entity. You said that Ottawa has a good pipeline into the public sector, but you've also had jobs in construction, and now you're working for a life insurance company, right? I'm sure there are differences between private and public, right? And I think we talked offline a little bit about the stereotypical kind of construction kind of workers, right? It's very different. Can you kind of tell us like the difference between like the culture of public versus private, but also like where you're at now?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I started my first co-op position was at the CRA, and it was like kind of in HR. And so that's kind of what made me end up switching my major from just general management to HR. But yeah, I don't know, like working at the government, it's definitely made for some people, but it just wasn't for me. I think it's a little bit more slow. The processes that they have in place are pretty solid. You can't really make changes if you want to. So if you want like a more established company that like there's not really a lot of unknowns, you go in, like you're set, you're like, I just want to go in, do the work I'm told and kind of leave. Then it's also very stable as well, and like good pensions and stuff like that. So if that's what you're looking for, then yeah, it can definitely be a good thing for you. That's just not what I was looking for. I was looking for something that I could go in and make changes and, move with the flow of like different things. So yeah, my second co-op position was at PCL, which is a construction company. I was in the HR department, which was more female than male, so it was okay. But the industry overall is obviously much more male dominated. And I could tell when some of like the hiring managers would chat with me, they would have a different tone and with that like hint of disrespect just because I'm not a man. And so it was noticeable. And so it wasn't really what I was looking for long term. Also, because it's quite an established company, it still kind of had that similar where a lot of the processes were kind of set in stone and it took a lot to change things. So that's just not where I wanted to go. Then I ended up at a startup out of school. I worked at a startup company for about a year and a half in recruitment. I didn't like recruitment. It's just not for me. And being at a startup was so different, especially from the government. It's like nothing is known. You don't know what's happening. It's just chaos all of the time. And so that was definitely a way like flip side of things. And so once I was done at the startup, I was like looking for my next job. And I'm like, what kind of industry do I want to go into? I wanted something that was kind of a combination of both, where like there's processes that are established, but they're not necessarily set in stone. And so that's why I ended up at the company I'm at now. The fact that it's life insurance doesn't really, like, that didn't really, it wasn't a factor as to why I chose that company. It was more so because it kind of operated somewhere between being a startup and like a government company. It was kind of like, it operated more so like a scale up where things were like constantly changing and shifting, and I could be part of those changes and shifts to help kind of just make the company better. And we're still kind of doing all of that because there's a lot of changes happening at my company. So it definitely gave me the opportunity to learn quite a bit. And I've been there for about 2.5 years now, and I've learned so much in that time, and there's still so much more going on. So I think it's just more so the culture of the company rather than the type of company, like whether it be industry or whatever. I think culture is like the biggest thing that really makes a difference.
I think for a lot of people starting out, they kind of want to have a prestigious company, or they want to make a ton of money, right? But they don't really take into account the culture of the company that exists, right? And you touched on the different areas of HR, right? HR, I think they set like the processes for the company, right? And they really build it from the ground up, which is why, you know, I kind of mentioned offline, like I think it's really underappreciated because almost everything you do kind of revolves around the policies and practices that you have in place, right? So for Emily, on the flip side, you started out at MasterCard consulting, right? So
Yeah.
that's very different to HR, two different sides of, I guess, the business coin. How did you originally get into consulting? And I guess a question that I always get, you know, in business school is, what is consulting in the first place?
Yeah, really good question. I actually, when my internships when I was in like first and second year were at startups. And so I think those are actually probably more similar to what I'm doing today, like kind of strategy and ops, like data analyst roles. And then ultimately when I graduated from university, I went into consulting first. Honestly, like the reason is because I went to Ivy and like they do a really good job recruiting for either finance or consulting. And so I was like, I should use the resources that I have here, and like I might as well start my career there. It's a really good place to start, and like kind of like what you said before earlier, like going to consulting is a key. It opens a lot of doors after the fact. A lot of startups value consulting skills because you learn a lot of these soft skills like communication and writing and whatever. So I think that was why I went into consulting. To be honest, I knew it was going to be a bit more of a stepping stone in my career. I knew I didn't want to stay in consulting because my internships were at startups. So eventually I wanted to move back into the tech scene. And then what was the second part to your question?
What is consulting? You know, it's a very blanket term. Yeah.
What is consulting is a great question. Yeah. I think ultimately you're just trying to problem solve. Usually what happens is you'll have a client come to you with a business problem, like our sales are declining, help. And usually why they would get a consulting company to help is because they don't have enough bandwidth themselves. Like companies are busy running their company, really. They need people to do the day-to-day things and like manage relationships with their clients and whatever. So they don't have a lot of time to just sit down, do analysis, see what other companies are doing and all of that, which is usually why they would get a consulting company to do it. So to your point, like with whatever work a consulting company does, usually like it's possible for you to do it within your company. That's just a lot easier to get someone else to do the work for you. Yeah. And then in terms of like what that looks like on a day-to-day basis, a lot of it is doing a lot of research online. So you're doing analyses to see what are other companies doing in the market. You're doing a lot of data analysis, so digging into the data that the company is doing. If the question was, why are our sales declining? Like you would probably dig into their data and understand, like, is it coming from a certain subset of customers? Is it because there's a new competitor entering the market? On all of these different things. And then finally, you're usually building a bunch of slideshows and decks to present this to your clients. So I would say like a huge chunk of the role is like understanding how to communicate all these findings to clients and to senior people. That's in a nutshell what consulting is.
Yeah, it sounds like you have like a huge toolkit of expertise across different industries, across different like functions, right? Like, for example, like if they come to you with a marketing problem, you might call back on a different marketing problem you had, and you have a lot more like concentration of knowledge than like one company might have, right?
Yeah, and
I
even think it's less than
yeah.
specific the industry or the type of problem you're solving. It's definitely more of you're training the skill of how to approach problems, how to think about problems, and then how to structure them, and then how to structure recommendations and solutions to the problems. Like that process is a very transferable skill versus like if you are working on a marketing project, like you might not be doing that in the future, versus doing something more broadly in communication and thinking, like critical thinking and breaking down problems. That's super transferable.
And you talked about transferable, and you transitioned into a different career at DoorDash, right? We all know DoorDash. We all love DoorDash. Yeah. How did you kind of find DoorDash, and like how did you find strategy and ops? What was the transition like?
Yeah, I think this was, they actually reached out to me on LinkedIn. They hire a lot of ex-consultants. So I do think like setting myself up that way was really helpful. Like just going into a consulting career got me to this point. And then in terms of like the interview process, it's pretty similar to what you would do for a consulting job. So that whole interview process was not too difficult either. And then the actual role I think is just really interesting. It's pretty much you're being a consultant, but internally, which is a lot more satisfying because you can take a problem, own it end to end. You can implement it. You'll hear a lot of consultants say why they leave is because they don't get to implement things. You like pretty much are throwing out all these recommendations, but you actually don't know if it's going to work or not. Versus when you start building that skill and you work for a company internally, then you actually can see whether or not the implementation works. You can keep iterating, and you actually get to build something versus just throwing out recommendations.
Yeah, I think seeing it end to end is great when you see your own work in our own journey, especially like we want to see success and we want to know that our ideas work. So I've definitely heard that before from a lot of consultants. And you kind of talked about a lot of transferable skills, and I want to bring Priya back in on this one. We talked a lot offline about feedback, right? That's something that everyone needs to give, and especially as you two have moved up in your career, I'm sure that you have more direct reports under you, which you have to give feedback, but I'm sure you're also taking feedback from people above to help you move up, right? So we'll start with Priya. What are some good tips when it comes to giving feedback and receiving feedback?
Yeah, for sure. So this is actually part of the role that I'm in now, which is pretty funny. So I do a lot of training on like giving and receiving feedback. I think one of the biggest things is just like being aware that it's not personal. Like it's not an attack on you unless it's being worded incorrectly, which is a whole other issue. But it's more so just to kind of help you grow. And like nobody's perfect, especially when they're first just starting in whatever role that they're doing. But even when you've been in that role for let's say like 20 years, you're still not perfect at your job. There's always things that are changing, always new things that you can improve on. And so it's really just like whether it be your direct manager or just like your peers, the feedback that you're getting is just to kind of help you grow. Another big thing is kind of just like managing those emotions. A lot of the times, like feedback can be difficult to hear, especially like some people are just more sensitive. Like there's nothing wrong with that. That's just how they are, and it's perfectly okay. But just being aware that you might be more sensitive, and we even like recommend to our employees sometimes, like during feedback conversations, if it's ever just too much, like just ask your manager to have a pause and be like, hey, can we like come back to this tomorrow or something? Like I just need some time to myself to kind of process this, and can we just come back to it later? And that's okay. Like it's okay to be human and be honest. That's perfectly fine. Another piece of feedback, not a piece of feedback, another recommendation I would give in terms of feedback is to remember that feedback goes both ways. So it's not just your manager giving you feedback, it's also you giving feedback to your manager. And I know that that can be really, really hard to do. Trust me, like having to do it, it's not easy. My heartbeat goes way up every time I have to. But a piece of advice that like we like to give our employees is this method called the start, stop, continue method. And it's pretty much just like, what are things you want your manager to start doing? What are things you want your manager to stop doing? And what are things you want your manager to continue doing? And so it just kind of helps to break it down your thoughts and kind of put it into easy, digestible pieces for both you and your manager as you're having that conversation. And also what I want to recommend is like use ChatGPT or like any kind of AI that you have access to, type down your thoughts into it and just be like, I'm trying to word this in a way to give the feedback to my manager. Can you make it sound nicer, make it sound more friendly? And it will spit back like something that isn't aggressive or isn't rude in any way. And you can even like make tweaks and stuff, be like, oh, can it be a bit nicer or maybe like a bit more professional? And it can help you out. Honestly, AI is very, very useful for situations like
Yeah.
this. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely a huge topic. I think everyone can use it. There's definitely use cases for it. And Emily, I'm curious to hear, like, as you've moved up at DoorDash, and you have probably more people reporting to you. What's been the biggest thing you've learned about giving and receiving feedback?
Um, I I think it's important to get frequent feedback. I think something that you learn early on, like people always say this, but like you'll end up experiencing probably is like you kind of wait to either give or get feedback. And I do not recommend that because you will just continue these bad habits. And like, yeah, make feedback something that is just consistent, something that happens continuously. Like, and I think that helps it make it feel less scary too, because you're like, oh, we're just like chatting, we're just being really candid. Again, it's not personal. I'm not like holding on to this thing that's going to weigh me down. Like this is just an iterative thing. I'm trying to think back to like in my internships, I don't think I did this enough. Like I don't think I asked for enough feedback. Like if after you are in a meeting, you have to present something, like just immediately ping your manager and be like, oh hey, like wanted to just get some quick feedback. How was that? How can I improve next time? And I think it could be seen as a more of a casual thing. And I think that's helped me not only get better feedback, but also just internalize feedback better. Like I don't let it hit my confidence as much because I'm like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. It's just like, oh, people are just saying it, just like chill thoughts versus like a really big deal, which is always difficult when you have to manage those types of conversations.
Yeah, for
I think.
sure. Sorry, I just want to add on to that.
Yeah.
Like when you have like performance reviews like once or twice a year, which a lot of companies are like, a lot of the times like managers and employees will wait until like the end of the year, whenever that's happening, for the feedback conversations to happen, and it won't be consistent. And I mean, think about it. If you only do something like once or twice a year, you're not going to be very good at it. It's going to be like, it's going to feel like a new experience every time. Whereas if you do something consistently, like you're going to get better at it, whether it be giving the feedback or receiving it. It just, like Emily said, it's like if it's continuous, it just becomes like a casual conversation or a part of that conversation.
Something that's probably more applicable is I wish I did this more in school, specifically for Ivy, because you get kind of close to your profs. And a lot of the stuff you do at Ivy, like you get marked on participation points. So like you actually are speaking in class and your prof might hear it. So I wish I asked for feedback from my profs too earlier on, because I think that would have helped me going forward and it would have helped build that relationship with my profs too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think you both touched on like a continuous two-way street, right? So that it's not such like a big like gasp moment, right? Where you need to like be scared of it, right? If it's continuous in two ways, it feels more casual, like you said, better flow, and it'll help you practice, to hopefully move up and do a better job at, whatever you're doing, right? So Priya, you touched on AI, right? And that's like a huge topic right now. So I'd love to hear from both of you. How has AI affected what you do day to day?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I kind of work in learning and development. So a large thing that we're working on now is teaching employees how we can incorporate it into our business. So I mean, I'm not going to get too into depth about it, but pretty much like, yeah, just how we can use like the different tools that are at our disposal. And I think a lot of the times people will say like AI is taking over our jobs and whatever. And I mean, to a certain degree, yes, but you also have to think like when the internet was created, everyone was like, oh my God, the internet's going to steal our jobs. And yeah, it did steal some jobs, but also think of how many more it created. And so I think like AI is kind of going along the same path. People are just kind of scared of change. And I think that's like one of the biggest things when it comes to introducing AI into whatever business you're doing or whatever work you're doing in general. Like a lot of people are scared of that change. They don't really know what it is. And so honestly, I think just like doing some research as to like what exactly is AI and how can it end up impacting your like specific position. And weirdly as it sounds, you can even use AI to ask it that. Just be like, hey, like, are you going to steal my job? Like, in what way? Like, what can you do to change the way that my job works? But yeah, so that's where like I'm currently at in terms of AI. It's more just like very, very new to my company, and we're just slowly implementing it, seeing how it can change different teams and help us be like more agile as we're trying to continuously make changes within the company and just overall.
I think it can give, a lot of good learning points, right? I've never, used it for, I guess, like HR purposes, but I'm sure it can definitely like give you ideas in terms of like what to do, because every situation is unique, right? So it might give you a perspective that you hadn't previously considered, maybe.
Yeah, I
That's
use
something.
it pretty much all the time.
Yeah.
My company, we use Copilot because it's part of Microsoft, but like personally, I just use ChatGPT. But yeah, it can help with like training plans. If there's if there's a specific skill I want to kind of focus on, I can even be like, okay, this is what I have so far. What do you think I should add? It even helps with like wording sometimes. If I'm like, this is what's on my slide right now, can you help condense it into like one sentence? It will help me with that. A lot of the work I do, it has to be in both English and French because we have employees in Quebec. So translating stuff as well. I can just be like, hey, can you translate this to French? And it will do it for me. Or just like checking over my French translations because it's not the best sometimes. So it can help with that. And yeah, I honestly, I use it all of the time to just help with new ideas. For example, like just as we're implementing new programs, just be like, hey, we want to implement this. What are your suggestions that like are easy places to start, so that we can kind of build from there. The one thing that AI doesn't have is like the context, right? So it's going to give you ideas, but then you still have to give like the context. So in a way, like I just see it as helping to kind of level me up. It does a lot of like the basic stuff that I don't need to go in and like do research on like what can I do. It does it for me in like 5 seconds. Another thing that it does is actually how we can jump back to Emily, is actually data analysis. If we do like an employee engagement survey and it comes back with like a bunch of data, we can like upload it into ChatGPT and be like, hey, can you assess all of these comments and like give us a summary of like how much, what percent is positive, what percent is negative, and just like what are the common themes that you're seeing that we need to focus on as an organization, and also what are some ideas to be able to start focusing on that. So there's like the possibilities are truly endless.
Yeah, I think you have a ton of good ideas, and you mentioned that segue to Emily. You're in the tech space, right, with DoorDash. And sorry, we kind of glossed over exactly, what it is that you do in strategy and ops, but you touched on the idea of data analysis, which I'm sure ChatGPT can definitely help with. But are there any specific areas in which AI has helped you in your job?
Yeah, part of my job is data and analysis. I think at strategy and ops at DoorDash, you can think about it as kind of like a data analytics person meets product manager meets business operate like biz ops, which is kind of like we look at the finances, like the profit and losses, like the P&L essentially of our companies. So we do look at the cost and revenues and all that. And then in terms of chat GPT or like AI, I use Gemini at work. And I think like it's kind of similar to what Priya was saying. I use it a lot for summarizing docs. So at DoorDash, we actually don't make any decks. Like we don't do a lot of presentations. We all just write a ton of docs, which is a lot to read through. So I use it to summarize docs. I use it to help me like improve my writing too. So like if I am writing a doc, I'll ask like, can you help make it sound more punchy, or like how can I reorganize it so that it reads better? And on the data and analysis side, you can also upload data to, assuming you have like the business version, enterprise version, you can upload data. And I've done that before and asked it to like come out with some takeaways. Or one thing that's really helpful that I know a ton of folks use here is helping us with SQL. So when we need to query or like write queries or write code and fetch data, there's a lot of times when you might run into errors or for whatever reason. So I ask AI a lot to help me unblock for things. So to Priya's point, I agree. Like it's definitely helpful for up leveling, and I think it can help offload a lot of the unimportant tasks that I hate spending time doing, and then I can spend my time doing like actual work. So that's effectively how we like using AI.
Yeah, I think you've both provided, great insights into how it can be used across, different industries, both, for like quantitative work, but also like qualitative work as well. It can help you with writing as well as, numbers. So we kind of glossed over a little bit about like specific projects maybe. So we'll start with Priya. Has there been a specific project or a specific accomplishment that you're most proud of?
um, let's go to Emily first, and I'll think
Okay.
about
Okay. Okay.
Oh man, it's like an interview question. I can't really think of one on the top of my head, but I actually think a lot of the work I do today is all pretty interesting to me. I don't know if it's like I'm proud of a lot of the stuff that I've done here. It's I can't really give you a specific example, and I don't want to give too much information because
Okay,
I don't
yeah,
know what
yeah,
is like
yeah.
shareable, what isn't.
Right. Okay.
But the just to give more context, like the team I'm on right now is I sit on the cost team, and so our whole goal is to reduce costs, one, and then two is to improve quality for our customers, which that means like you whatever you order on DoorDash you get. And I work on new verticals, so it's like grocery, convenience, and all that. Just like think about your Instacart experience when you order something. Priya had this recently. You order something and then you get something else, or like it's out of stock, and like that's an
Yeah.
awful experience. So like the main thing we always want to do is try to get people everything they ordered. We want to make sure your order doesn't get canceled. Just have like a great experience on the app. And so a lot of every time we make a change or we push a product out, we look at one, like how much cost have we saved? So like, and usually this number is in the millions, so that's really impactful. And then secondly, we look at, did we make this experience better for customers? Like how many more people got exactly what they ordered versus like got their order canceled? And like we look at all these metrics. So to answer, I don't really have a good answer for your question, but I do think like everything you work on, immediately we do look at the business impact, and it's always like pretty interesting.
I read the other day that you can take a loan now on DoorDash. It's like you can.
Well, you can use buy now pay later. So you can you can finance your burrito.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. That caught my attention the other day. I wanted to ask you because I knew this was coming up.
Yeah, it
What?
definitely got memed on.
Yeah.
I think it's relevant for like big grocery orders, or like we have a lot
Yeah.
of retailers, like we have Best Buy in the US, so like I guess that kind of makes sense too. I don't think I would not be wise to finance
Yeah.
your burrito.
Sure. How much are the like interest rates on that? Is it like credit card rates or is it like?
It's whatever like the buy now pay later companies
Okay.
use. I'm not too close to
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've never used it, but I wanted to ask if you heard anything about it because that caught my eye for sure. Because I
Yeah.
never thought about doing that. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Priya, do you have any accomplishments? I know you mentioned like you really help scale the company, right? And that starts with HR, right? Would that be the biggest accomplishment for you?
Yeah, honestly, my answer is going to be pretty similar to M's. Like, it's
Yeah.
just kind of like the work that I've done over the past like 2.5 years that I've been here.
Yeah.
My company we acquired a portion of Sun Life, and then we also had like a divestiture for one of our sister companies like last year. So a lot of like growth has happened at my company since I started, and a lot of changes like here and there. So definitely just all of the things I've kind of touched, and kind of just being like a key person within like the HR team. The HR team itself, when I first started, was like, I want to say like 8 people, and now we're at like 20-ish. So it's been like quite a lot of growth just within the HR team. And like I'm one of the people who like has been there the longest. So just like helping people out and stuff, but also just like being in HR. I get to like working with people again. So it's just like the work that I'm doing and seeing how it impacts people is definitely helpful as well. And just like the feedback that I get from people being like, thank you so much for your help. And like, you really helped me with this or really helped me with that. It's like, it really touches my heart. And so it's really nice to see that as well. But yeah, I see I'm to drop soon, so we can wrap up.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll wrap up soon. We've shared a lot about different pathways you can take inside a business. But I guess the first question I asked was about high school and going into high school, things like that. If you could both share like a piece of advice that you would give maybe like 16, 17-year-old, 18 self, what would it be?
So yeah, for me, it would be like, don't worry too much if you don't know what you want to do. It's not really that serious. Like a lot of people put a lot of pressure on it, but it's really not that serious. You can figure it out later in life. You don't have to figure it out right now. You can figure it out in 10 years, 20 years. It honestly, like you're okay, especially with the way the world is now. Like you can do online school, you can do so many different things. Like you're good, you'll figure it out. And the second thing I want to say too is like high school is not the best 4 years of your life. A lot of people say that it is. It is not. It does get better after high school. I promise you that. It gets better for sure.
How about you, Emily? What's some words of wisdom for us?
I think just try to enjoy it as much as you can. Like it's gonna be hard right now. Like I know everyone has their own problems and drama and stuff. Like when you're in high school, and it will seem like your whole world because it is. But like Priya said, like there's just so much more that you're gonna experience in the next 4 years in university or not. Like whatever you do, it's gonna be so much more. And like time continues passing. And I don't know, I feel like I just put so much emphasis on my high school experience, and like I tried to optimize every decision I made, but at the end of the day, like every decision you make is not permanent for the rest of your life. So there's just so much more life left to live. So I wouldn't worry too much about the decisions you make today. And then lastly, I think like just trust yourself a little bit more. I think that'll come with age. You'll trust the decisions that you make a little bit better. You'll know yourself a little bit better. But yeah, try to keep that like confidence in yourself as you go through the rest of your life. I think that'll really help you progress. So yeah, high school and university are really fun years. Like just try to make the most of it, meet new people, put yourself outside of your comfort zone, have some fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for all your insights today about giving feedback, navigating your own path, figuring out what's for you, finding your group of people. I think something I really wanted to highlight in this episode specifically is the idea of bringing people together, right? Because you two have been friends for over 20 years, stuck together through all those times. So thank you so much to both of you. Thank you everyone so much for watching. We'll see everyone next week. Peace out.